Hi friends! If you've been following me here on YouTube or TikTok, Instagram, anywhere on the internet, or if you know me in real life, you've probably heard me talk at some point about how I quit my corporate job to embark on this new adventure, building a creative career. Well, a question I get a lot from people is, how did you do that? And maybe how can I do that too? So I wanted to make this video to just kind of break it down really candidly and talk about the three things that I did when I knew that it was time for me to take that leap. So first, a little context, a little backstory. My name is Jasmine Janae. I'm an artist, singer, songwriter, creative, content creator, all of these different things, but these are relatively new titles for me. So I started my career in a very sort of straight and narrow corporate path. I worked in sports, I worked in business, I worked in consulting, I worked in tech, and what I learned over the course of an almost 15-year career is that life is not for everybody. There are a lot of perks to it, and certainly the background that I had. And just to underscore how sharp of a departure this was for me, I'm someone who grew up in a household where education was highly, highly valued. Doing all of the honors classes, I was good at math and science, and all the grown-ups around me constantly said, oh, you should be a doctor, you should be an engineer, just kind of tossing out all of these careers that to them meant success, money, prestige, all the things that we're sort of, taught to want and taught to go after. Then after high school, same thing in college. And I went to Harvard at that, so no small thing. And being surrounded by people who were so clear on what they wanted to do in business, in medicine, in law, all these different fields, it was a very, very small number of people who were pursuing things in the arts, pursuing things creatively. And honestly, I just did not think that that was a real path for me. I thought that that was something fun that you do on the side. And I just got into my head that if I wanted to be a real grown up, if I wanted to be a real professional, then I needed to go and get a real job. And so that's what I did. And I worked in sports. I moved to New York. I worked for the NFL. And actually, we can skip over all of that because that's not even the point of this video. The point of this video is talking about the things I did to get myself out of that career once I knew it was time to leave. So let's get into that. Number one, probably seems really obvious, was just deciding how I wanted to live, deciding how I wanted my days to look, how I wanted my days to feel, and determining what I would need financially to feel really comfortable in that life. And I want to emphasize the comfort part of this because like I mentioned before, I think I had really bought into this idea of the struggling artist and that to live a life as a creative or to build a career as a creative, you had to be broke and you had to struggle. And look, one thing about Jasmine, I don't do struggle. I just don't. So for me, it was really important to understand what I needed to be comfortable so that I wasn't setting myself up for a life of just feeling miserable just for the sake of saying that I could quit this job. So in my case, that meant I wanted to be able to stay in the home that I live in. It meant that I wanted to stay in the city that I lived in. It meant that I still wanted to be able to have my simple pleasures like eating out every once in a while, going on trips, hanging out with friends, doing activities that might cost money. I didn't want to be in a situation where I had to slash my budget so much that I was just confined to a life that felt maybe even worse than I did in the job. And so that's kind of the first thing that I would advise anyone who's thinking about making that leap. Get really, really honest with yourself about the kind of life that you want to live, the kind of lifestyle you want to live, and figure out how much it's going to cost you to be able to keep that up. I'll also add that part of getting really honest with yourself about what feels comfortable or what will be comfortable is also figuring out where you can live on less. There are definitely some things in my life, not that I was an extravagant person per se, but there were definitely some things where it's like, hey, I can cut that out of the budget and still feel fine. Or hey, I don't need to be going on multiple international vacations a year to feel comfortable. We can cut some of that out and still be fine. So whatever that looks like for you, that's the first thing I suggest. Figure out what kind of life you want to live and determine how much it's going to cost. All right, number two. So second thing I did, once I had an understanding of how much money I needed to be able to live comfortably, taking into account the things that I was willing to sacrifice and sort of downgrade or just downsize on, the next thing was figuring out how long would it take me to get enough of a reserve, enough of a cash cushion together that I could feel comfortable walking away from my job, maybe even before I knew I was going to have new income coming in. So let me pause here and tell a little bit more backstory. So I am a creative, I'm a singer. You know, this is the kind of field where you don't necessarily go and just apply for a new job in your new career and boom, you start making money. It takes time, you know, and this is a reason that a lot of people, a lot of artists especially, you'll hear them talk about how they maintain a full-time job or maintain a part-time job and have something else going on that's bringing them consistent income while they're building their creative path or while they're building out whatever this new stream of income and revenue is going to be. A decision that I made, and I know that this is not the case for everyone, but a decision that I made was that I needed a break. Like, I needed some time. I was so burnt out from the corporate grind. I was working crazy hours, meeting impossible demand. Like, it was just a lot. There's whole separate videos where I talk about that, so I won't go into it here. But the thing that I determined when I was kind of back in step one and figuring out, hey, what am I going to need to really feel comfortable? What am I going to need to really just like live the life that I want? And I knew that that started off with a break. I needed some time where I was not going to be so pressed for cash that I was just jumping right back into another hustle because I was so afraid for my livelihood. So figuring out a timeline for how long it would take me to earn, save, accumulate enough that I can make that leap, that was step two. There's a couple ways to go about this. So for me at the time, I was fortunate that as much as I complained about the job that I had, I'm fortunate that it did pay me well. It paid me very well, in fact. A running joke that I would have with friends sometimes is that, hey, you know, the job will drive you crazy, but at least it will fund the recovery. That's a little bleak, but it's true. And so I say that because I never want to give the impression that it's just like, oh, just like save a little money and quit your job. I know it's not that easy. I was in a very fortunate position where I was a high earner. I was making a good salary. I had good benefits. I was also able to invest a lot as well. And so what I'm saying and what I'm doing, if that is not your circumstance, it may not work for you, okay? Like, I'm just some stranger on the internet, so please don't come for me if you're like, Jasmine, that's unreasonable, that's unattainable. I understand. So this is my take what you need, leave the rest. If it doesn't apply, let it fly. But that's the next thing that I did. And so for me, I determined that I needed to buckle down and get really, really serious for at least a year, possibly a little longer, to have to build up that cash cushion that I knew I was going to need to feel comfortable. And so for me at the time, I was actually not working at the time that I sort of made this plan, that I was coming up with this corporate exit plan. I had left a job. I was just like burnt out, mentally not doing super well. And so I'd sort of quit that job with really no plan at all. And it wasn't until a couple of months of being unemployed and like having no like real safety net that I was like, all right, let's A, get a job, but B, figure out how we don't end up in this predicament again. And so for me, I knew that I was going to need to go and get honestly the same kind of job that was already frying me and already burning me out. I know that is not the thing that a lot of people want to do, but I knew I was going to be able to go about it differently this time because one, I had a goal, I had a mission in mind that went beyond whatever the company was telling me was important. This time it was for me. This time it was personal, and this time I was actually committed to it because it represented something so much bigger and so much more important than just hitting goals for the company for the sake of hitting them. And so I wasn't working at the time that I made this plan, but I determined, like, once I knew how much I was gonna need to really feel comfortable, I committed that I was gonna grind it out and give it my best for a solid year. And then we were gonna see where we were. And so for me, I took another job. I was working in tech. I did kind of like account management and operations work. Like, that may mean nothing to you at all. Not important for the story, but I knew going in from the interview stage, from negotiating my salary, from figuring out what sort of stock compensation I could get, like how can I squeeze the most I possibly can out of this earning opportunity so that I'm setting myself up for this exit. And then once I was in the job, once I was there, I had to really work. Like, I had to really work and I had to give it my all so that every quarter when it came time for bonuses, incentives, whatever it may be, like I was able to maximize as much as possible. And then the second part of that was saving. And so I committed that I was going to save half, at least half of everything that I earned from that job. And again, I know that this is an immense privilege to even have a job that paid me enough that I could save half and live well on the other half and be okay. And that's something I was committed to. So it meant I did say no to some trips that I wanted to go on. It meant that I did say not now to some purchases that I wanted to make. It was just cultivating a discipline because in my mind, it was much more important that I make the money that I needed to make and have it saved and stashed away so that when I made this leap, I knew that there was going to be a net. And I got resourceful. I didn't sort of just like throw caution to the wind and hope for the best. I worked with a financial advisor. It wasn't an ongoing relationship. I literally paid for 2 consultations, laid it all out there. I was like, here are my finances, here's what I'm trying to do, and got some help, got some advice on different ways that I could go about saving and investing to really maximize everything that I was earning. So that's number 2 in a nutshell. Figure out a timeline and then get to work earning, saving, investing, doing whatever it is you need to do so you can build up that nest egg. And then the third thing that I did while I was sort of figuring out this corporate exit plan was really to try to trial run the life that I was trying to move into. I feel like at that point, I remember talking to so many people who had pivoted or transitioned in their career, not necessarily to, going from corporate to creative, but just going from, any field to another field, only to get there and realize, this is not exactly what I thought it was going to be, or this actually doesn't really fit my lifestyle the way I thought. And so even though I felt pretty sure, like there was something deep inside that was driving me and steering me this way, I still wanted to make sure that I wasn't just like running towards some lofty goal, just for the sake of getting away from the thing that I didn't want to be in anymore. And so for me, I spent the entire time that I was working that job, knowing that I had this exit plan in mind, I spent that time kind of like microdosing the lifestyle of a musician, an artist, a singer, a songwriter. I was taking time to do songwriting camps. I was finding open mics and venues to perform in the city that I'm already in. I was out networking. I was meeting people. I was talking to folks who were further along than me, telling them what I was trying to do, sort of getting their reactions and getting their insight as well. So by the time a year went by, it wasn't like I was some newcomer on the scene. Yeah, I was still new. Yeah, I still had a lot to learn, but I had some name recognition. I had some face recognition. There were people who were already ready to support me and to help me so that when it was time for me to actually make that leap, I wasn't just going into completely unknown territory. And so that also gave me the confidence and a little bit of a boost to feel like, oh yeah, I can do this, because if I'm making this much traction when I'm just sort of doing it, not even part-time at that point, it's like less than part-time and just sort of feeling my way through, and I was already finding a little bit of success, finding people who were like, hey, I really like your writing. Hey, I really like your music. Hey, have you thought about this? Or inviting me to participate on a project that they were working on in this way. There were even days that I was taking time off of work because I needed to be in the studio, or I needed to be at a seminar, I needed to be at a conference, because I was already getting myself in the swing of this new career and this new lifestyle that I wanted to build. And so that's really it. It's not a whole lot of smoke and mirrors. It was pretty straightforward. And if I'm being honest, I'm still in the figuring it out phase. This is not the type of thing where I said, hey, I'm going to make this exit and take this leap, and now I've got this brand new career and we're off to the races and everything is good. Like, no, I'm very much still building this. Like, you're watching it in real time. You're watching it happen in real time. But I wanted to talk about that sort of exit plan because I know two things. Two things that come up a lot when people talk about this is feeling stuck and feeling scared. And I know both of those very, very well. I know that feeling of feeling stuck and knowing that it's like, this is not what I am meant to be doing. I cannot continue to spend my days like this. I cannot continue to spend the rest of my life like this, but not feeling like you have a whole lot of options because you're maybe strapped financially, or not feeling like you have a clear path or a clear plan on what to do next. And I know the feeling of being scared and just not knowing, like, hey, am I really going to leave the thing that is stable and secure and provides me a lot of, financial stability, but is draining every other part of my life force? Am I really willing to walk away from that into this unknown that might be better, might not, we don't know. But just for me, like, and maybe this is just the way that my personal faith is set up, I simply don't believe that I am meant to live a life of misery. I simply don't believe that I am meant to live a life where I have to suppress my gifts and suppress the things that light me up inside to be in service to building someone else's dream. And so this is not to bash corporate 9 to 5, whatever. I just wanted to maybe put it out there because, hey, this is a thing that I tried and it's working for me so far. And maybe if you are someone who, like I was, is looking to strangers on the internet for ideas and inspiration just to get yourself out of that rut, here's one way. Is it the way? No. Is it the only way? Certainly not, but it's my way. And so if there's anything that I've said or anything that you've seen from me that resonates, maybe give it a try. But that's my story. That's how I made my exit plan. I'm here now on the other side, still very much building. Like I said, you're witnessing it in real time. So if anything, I appreciate you being along for the ride. If there's anything I said that sparked a question, sparked a thought, please feel free to leave me some feedback in the comments. I love reading them and talking back with you guys. But that's all for now. Till next time.